Let me see, have a look, Girma. Yes, I can see a visual background. It's good.
But your face is cut, Girma. You may want to maybe adjust your chair. I think that's better.
Yeah, that's it's better.
Yeah. I think it's always good unless we have a connectivity issue, it's always good to open your video while speaking. Actually, the whole team, it would be nice if we can just open our videos during the session, if possible. Otherwise, when you have things to do, like, sip your coffee, you can always switch it off. But it makes it lively, for other people. Sometimes it's like a black screen. Good morning, Vinda. You may also want to adjust yours slightly.
I say I'm seated. What adjustment you want me to make? I'm quite seated upright.
No, that's fine. We can see you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Vinda, can you try to add the background that was sent by Mark, the video, the Zoom background, like the one that is on Mark's.
What?
Mark sent some background for use, like the one which is appearing behind him.
Did I get that?
Please, Max, you can quickly maybe send to Vida the background. You don't have to, you can send only the English to him.
Okay. Hello. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for allocating your time to join and participate to this learning webinar session. I would like us to give again a couple of 2 minutes maybe, so that we can have more participants joining. And at exactly 9:05, we are going to start. So please bear with me, and let's wait for another 2 minutes, and we shall start. Thank you. Okay, so it is 9:05 on my watch, so I think we can start. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you so much for joining to this webinar session, which is co-organized by IDEV, the Country Office of Malawi, AHAI, and AHFR. And today the webinar is going to be on the theme towards better design and implementation of irrigation intervention, the case of Malawi. So we shall be together for at most 2 hours, and I shall be the facilitator, and I'm called Marealle Papase, knowledge management and communication consultant within the IDEV department. And I shall, the facilitation will also, I will be assisted, I would say, by a colleague, Ms. Maria Saguti. Maria, can you join me a little bit?
Yes, sir. Here I am, Mark. My name is
Maria?
Marealle. Yes, as he introduced me, I'm the Principal Land Officer from Department of Agriculture and Agro-Industry. Thank you. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, Maria, we can hear you.
Okay. Hello, as I introduce myself, my name is Maria Marealle, and I'm the Principal Land Officer from the Department of Agriculture and Agro-Industry. I'll be assisting Mark in facilitating the session. Thank you so much, Mark.
Maria, I think
Hello?
we've lost Mark. Do you want to take over
Mark
in taking
has
us
an internet
through?
issue.
Yes, yes, I can take
He's
over
disconnected, so
Jerusalem. Is he connected?
yes, he's not connected. He's
Okay,
back
maybe.
now, Mark.
Okay.
I think he has an internet issue. Maybe Mrs. Marealle, you can proceed.
Yes, I will proceed. I'll take it over from Mark, and when he's back, he will take it over. As I indicated, I'm Maria, and we are going to have to facilitate this session today with a theme towards better design and implementation of irrigation interventions, where we're going to learn lessons from the Malawi impact evaluation and other agricultural water management projects. We have our program in front of us, which is divided into about 4 parts. We'll have the welcoming remarks from our country, acting country manager from Malawi country office, which will be followed by 3 presentations. The first presentation will be given by Girma, and it is titled Lessons Learned from the Malawi Impact Evaluation and Other Agricultural Water Management Projects. How do we do better things? That is our first presentation. The second presentation will be given by Mr. Vinda Kisombie from Malawi Country Office, and this presentation is titled Systematic Integration of Knowledge from IDEV's Evaluation into the Design and Implementation of Bank Irrigation Interventions. And the third presentation will be given by Chuma from AHFR, which is titled Towards Better Irrigation Infrastructure and Effective Farmers Schemes. What works, what doesn't work? This will be followed by question and answer sessions and closing remarks. Maybe before we move into the program itself, I would like to share with you some of the things, or maybe to remind you that for the presenters, would like you to hit your mute button when you're not talking, but when you are presenting, please, it will be good for you to be seen. So you open your video, and we can hear you properly and see you properly when you are making a presentation. And it will also be good if you sit with your window behind, in front of you. Don't sit with your window behind you. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for the audience to see you when you make your presentations. And for the attendees, I would like you to mute your webcam as well as your mic, and wait for your time. When we have question and answer session, you will be given the rights, or the way you can the rights to switch on your mic and your video. Without wasting time, I would like to now call upon our acting country manager from Malawi to give us the opening remark, Ms. Eyerusalem Fasika. The floor is yours. Welcome, Ms. Eyerusalem.
Thank you, Maria, for this introduction. And good morning, everybody. I hope you're all doing well wherever you are, and also keeping safe. We're all doing here from the Malawi country office family. We thank you again for joining us to this morning webinar on better design and implementation of irrigation interventions. Just to give you a background, in 2019, the bank's independent development evaluation department conducted an impact evaluation on the bank's finance projects in Malawi. The evaluation, as you have heard, entitled Impact Evaluation of the AfDB supported small irrigation projects, selected 2 projects for the evaluation purpose. And these projects were smallholder co-production and marketing project, which was completed in 2014, and also the agriculture infrastructure support project. This project was also completed in 2017. So the evaluation is basically giving us the lessons learned from these two bank-financed irrigation projects. So the evaluation aimed to improve knowledge and provide lessons to maximize the impact of ongoing and future irrigation development interventions in Malawi, as well as in bank-wide as we implement or as we support regional member countries in implementing agriculture projects, particularly irrigation interventions. Following the completion of the evaluation report this year, we prepared a management response, and this was presented to CODE last month on the 25th of September. And this was received well. We're also pleased to note that the evaluation finds the bank-supported irrigation projects in Malawi had positive impact on many development outcomes. Some of these included crop productivity, revenue from crops, food security with effective leadership, poverty reduction, and enhanced crop diversification amongst the participating households. Though positive results were registered, we've also noticed, the areas that were not very successful. We acknowledge, the evaluation findings that while crop diversification was attained, crop intensity had not increased as expected. In addition, the evaluation found no evidence of impacts on child nutrition and health. So this will be explained during Girma's presentation. But when we look at the positive outcomes that have been registered, this would not have been possible without the combined efforts of the bank and the government of Malawi and also the beneficiaries. Overall, we have agreed and welcomed the recommendation and the valuable lessons learned from this report and its timeliness in informing the Malawi CSP midterm review, which is currently underway. The findings of the evaluation will also inform new programs and projects in Malawi, and I'm sure you'll also find them useful as you design your operations, particularly in agriculture and water sector departments. As the saying goes, knowledge increases by sharing, but not by saving. That's why we have organized this webinar in collaboration with IDEV, Agriculture and Agro-Industry Departments, Agriculture, Finance and Rural Development Department, to share with you the valuable lessons and recommendations of the report, as well as the experience of Malawi in implementing bank-financed irrigation projects in the last several years. We will also be sharing the findings with the government stakeholders, the development partners, and also other relevant partners to further enhance our evidence-based sectoral and policy dialogue. In the management response, we have developed actions that will be implemented at a country level here, as well as at a sector level. We have set a clear time frame to implement this recommendation. Actually, this webinar is actually part of the implementation of the recommendation in terms of sharing knowledge. So let me stop here, and I look forward for the presentations and the discussion. Thank you again. Over to you, Maria.
Thank you very much, Eyerusalem, for that exciting opening remarks. Indeed, we are going to see how the recommendations have benefited the country level as well as the sector level, and the way the knowledge has been disseminated, and how the country level is working towards implementing all the recommendations. And without wasting time, I would like now to welcome Girma Kumbi, who is the Chief Evaluation Officer from IDEV, who is going to give us the positive and areas whereby the country office as well as the sector needs to improve as a result of getting the findings from the evaluations. And Girma is going to give us a presentation titled Lesson Learned from Malawi Impact Evaluation and Other Agricultural Water Management Projects. How do we do things? Over to you, Girma. The floor is yours.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, colleagues, for joining us for this webinar. Today, I'm going to present you about the impact evaluation of the small-scale irrigation project in Malawi. We did this evaluation in 2019, and the report was presented to CODEL just last September. We would like to share with you the key findings of this evaluation, and then how it is going to be improved in a future or ongoing project. Basically, the content of my presentation is focusing on 4 areas. First, I will share with you what are the key features of the evaluated projects and the evaluation methodology, on key finding and the lessons for going forward. About the feature of the project or the characteristics of the project we evaluated, Eyerusalem already mentioned these projects are a very important project, but in terms of improving the livelihood of the rural household in Malawi. If we look at the objective of these 2 projects, they are basically focusing on the same areas. First is agriculture productivity, which is very important in order to attain the food security, poverty reduction. First, we have to change productivity. That's an important factor in irrigation project. And the second is, of course, farm income. The farmer has to generate income from their farming activities and thereby achieve the food security and so on. Later on, I will share with you the key intermediate and final outcome variables that we try to assess the impact of this project on. And these 2 projects, basically, if we look at, they provided almost similar kind of outputs. For example, both of them are focusing on developing irrigation infrastructure, community level marketing facilities, and as well as training farmers and supporting local level institutions such as water user association and cooperatives. So more or less, the 2 projects have similarities in terms of the type of intervention and the objectives they are going to they intended to achieve. And as you see the period, the first project was completed in 2014, the second was in 2017. So there was a reasonable time to estimate the impact actually. And so let me go to the next part of the presentation. Well, in how we did this evaluation, that's one important thing I will briefly share with you shortly, because this is an impact evaluation a bit different from the usual evaluation we do. And this is, and also the impact evaluation is done after the projects were completed. So for this purpose, we have to look for a methodology that can address all the challenges. Anyway, we applied mixed approach in this, which we call it quantitative evaluation methodology as well as qualitative. In quantitative methodology, we followed quasi-experimental design, where we have a treatment group, which means the beneficiaries from the project. And we have also counterfactual, which we call a comparison group from potentially irrigable schemes. You know, what helped us a lot here is the government of Malawi has prepared a pipeline of irrigation schemes in what is called Irrigation Master Plan, where they identify districts and sites where there will be potential for irrigation. So that helps us to generate a comparison group for our treatment group. So at the end, we will compare the results between these two groups. In terms of sampling and data, we followed basically random sampling of household. At the end, the households we collected data from were selected randomly, but we followed a multi-stage to arrive in this case. Actually. So the total sample size was 1,800 households, and we equally split this equally between treatment group as well as comparison group, 900 and 900. So we generated the data used in this evaluation from this outlet. As I mentioned, we applied the mixed method. The first is quantitative, which I just explained. On the terms of qualitative, we also did interviews and focus group discussion on selected schemes, which were already covered by the quantitative, but we went into 6 of them to do in-depth interviews with the stakeholders to complement the quantitative result or the statistical result. So in terms of estimation models, we applied 2 models which are complementing to each other. Here, I think it is, I will not go into detail of this. We call it endogenous switching regression and inverse probability weighting regression. And this will, basically we applied this model based on, the limitations with the quasi-experimental design itself. So I think I encourage you to go to the report in order to get the detail of these methodologies. Given the shortage of the time, I will not go into depth. So this evaluation is not without limitation. As I said, we don't have baseline data here at the time because when the project was just launched, we have not collected the data at that time for the evaluation, I mean, because for us, we just came at the end of the project, so we only try to compare between treatment and the comparison group. So the second is still there is a potential bias because the project just select its beneficiaries purposely based on availability of irrigation, water, and so on. And the third is the result we found is basically shows the average impact of all components of the project. So we cannot disaggregate the results, for example, for training and so on. So for us, the result shows the average effect of all project components. Indeed. So having said this, I would like to share with you now what are the key findings now. I focus on the key finding for the detail of statistical analysis or econometric analysis. Again, I really recommend you to go to read the report, and you can send me an email if you need any more elaboration on the methodologies. But here I just present the results in a very non-technical terms. Okay, so we measure the impact on key intermediate outcome as well as final outcome. On intermediate outcome, we looked at the impact of irrigation on yield, on farm income, crop diversification, and crop intensity. These are the intermediate income. For the final income, we looked at food security, poverty, child nutrition, and health of household. That's the final outcome. Now, when we come to intermediate outcome, the evaluation found that the irrigation projects increased maize yield almost by 36%. And also it increases the revenues from maize and the total crop revenues, because there are also other crops that we collect data on. So when we look at that, irrigation has really increased. There is a statistical evidence that the irrigation increased yield, as maize yield and crop revenues in total. And one interesting thing is the result shows that the revenues generated from vegetables are higher than the revenues generated from maize, which is of course established fact in the past, given that vegetables generate a good price for the farmer. The other very positive impact is on crop diversification. So this irrigation helped the farmers to grow more crops compared to the previous time, or compared to the comparison group who did not participate in the programs. So the last intermediate outcome we looked at is the crop intensity, where we didn't find an evidence. Here we didn't find any difference between the treatment and the comparison group in this aspect. I think these are for many factors that I'll describe later on, but the statistical evidence shows there is no evidence of impact on crop intensity. But our qualitative study, or deep focus group discussion and the interviews showed us that there are issues that contribute to this factor, particularly underutilization of the irrigation scheme and the lack of markets and other conflicts and so on among farmers are some of them which I will mention later. Now I come to the final outcome now, the ultimate outcome, of course. One is food security. In food security, the irrigation shows a positive impact of food security for the farm households, as well as there is also positive impact on the poverty indicators as well, which is really very interesting. It's finding in order to really promote irrigation programs overall. In food security, basically we measured with two indicators, which we call it household food insecurity access score, and as well as household food diversity scores. And so again, the detail of this methodology is described in the report. I think that's very, if you have any question on that, again, I'm happy to describe. Okay, there is one area what is surprised us is here is the impact of irrigation on the health of the household. We try to measure this through whether there is any evidence of, any incidence of illness in the household. So we found that the, that farmers in the irrigation participated in irrigation has slightly more, prone to illness compared to the comparison groups. So basically this come as a result of established issues in the previous studies. Irrigation can usually create a conducive environment for waterborne disease and so on. So I think this is where we see a very interesting finding to take into account. The other is a impact on, we measure also the impact on child nutrition, and there is no evidence again on the impact of this irrigation on child nutrition, because the idea is that if irrigation improves food security and food diversity, then in turn we expect nutrition will be improved. But I think this is not, this study shows there is no direct link. There are other factors that can affect child nutrition in addition to availability of food. The food is maybe available at home, but it's the way it is prepared and given to the child and how other issues are very important, which require further studies. On poverty, as I said, is an important indicator. We try to measure poverty using both objective and subjective assessment. On objective, we looked at the usual expenditure per capita as well as multidimensional poverty. On subjective measures, we looked at the self-assessment of the household themselves in terms of change in their welfare, life satisfaction, and so on. Overall, we found that the statistical results show that there is an improvement in these indicators overall. So as you can see, there is an improvement in most of the indicators, but there are areas that should be improved. Well, now, okay, the project, the irrigation project, they improved most outcome variables, but how did that benefit distribute among households? Sometimes the distribution is also important. Is it only few farmers who are benefited, or the benefit goes to all? For this, we looked at basically at 3 variable socioeconomic variables. Gender, landhold size, and education. These are important in the farm household. And in terms of gender, interestingly, we found that female households have a better change in their welfare situation as well as in poverty situation compared to female households who were not participating in the irrigation. This is a very good, interesting finding. But what is important now is most of the total incomes goes to the male-headed households. So the male, when we look at the income generated from crop and as well as from maize, the male-head households earn a better income compared to female household. But it's female-headed household who improve the welfare of the household or the family, which is very interesting. But as you know, we get all the income, the male-headed household get most of the income, but did not spend in improving the welfare situation compared to female household. This is what is very, very important. The second, in terms of the landholding size, is it relatively smaller or relatively larger farmer who is benefited in terms of here? We have seen that maize yield, basically smaller landholders, which have less than 0.6 hectares, they increase the maize productivity increase most compared to middle as well as large farmers. But the issue is that even though the productivity is higher, since the farm is small, it didn't change their welfare situation, didn't change much their poverty situation. That's what our statistical results showed to us. So even though the productivity is larger for relatively small holder, but the welfare change is better for relatively larger. Again, here when I talk small, large, it's a relative term. As you know, most of rural households in Africa, they are relatively, there is land fragmentation, particularly nowadays. So we just measure in terms of relativity. Anyway, the point is that still land constraint is very, very important when we consider irrigation development. The other is formal education. As you know, this is really straightforward, and farmers who have higher level of education has better in terms of income generated, poverty reduction from these irrigation schemes. Okay, now next I go to we found positive outcome as well as, of course, areas to improve, but are the benefits sustainable in the future? So in this evaluation, we found really the sustainability is very low because of really some key issues. The first is weak organizational capacity at local level, particularly poor scheme irrigation designs, inadequate market, conflict among farm household, as well as beneficiaries' dependency on for input and maintenance of irrigation. Those are the factors that affect them. I will explain later in the lessons. So, okay, after this, okay, what are the lessons we can generate for ongoing or future projects? These are basically we focused on 5 lessons. The first is capacity and the governance system for local institution is very, very important for the success of irrigation, small irrigation scheme. So here, when we mention local institutions, this is the farm organization who manages, the irrigation schemes, as well as, of course, government structure who support this local organization. So so when we say capacities, it's capacity in terms of leaderships, in terms of managing the financial system of the this local organization. As you know, the irrigation schemes usually they are managed by water user associations. So the capacity of this water users is very important in terms of leadership. In areas where there is good leadership, we found that there is a positive really impact for even at the scheme level. We can mention these are, for example, there is one scheme in closer to Blantyre, which is called Marealle. It's a very good success story. So without having good leadership, it's different. The second is even the financial management system capacities, because this organization has to work properly through established ways and governance system. Otherwise, the collection of fees from members as well as other source of income is problematic. This is found in other even agricultural water management evaluations, as well as we also seen in one of the irrigation in Eswatini. So it's really very important to have a good governance system in local institution and empower them properly. For example, not all water user associations have legal status to in the country. So if there is legal entity, then it has the power to sue or to be sued. That will help enhance the governance transparency in the farm. So unless otherwise we have this system in place, this institution cannot really punish its member for wrongdoing. Some of, let's say, the chair of the water user association can collect all the money and can go away or use for a personal purposes. So if there is no legal system to follow up on this, it's difficult. So maintenance of the irrigation will be in problem, and then creates mistrust among the member. The capacity of local government in terms of there is a local extension agent as well as irrigation officers are at local level, but they don't have adequate capacity also to support these local organizations like water user association, as well as, of course, cooperatives. So these are areas that we picked as a good lesson in the future when we can focus on these areas. The second lesson is about marketing, really. Usually we think that if we build marketing structure like market storage or market shading, we think the market will be there. But this is necessary, but it's not sufficient to create the market. That's why we found that there are many market centers were built, but they were not used as such. So they are totally unused. Some of them are even, they sit almost idle, closed. So I think that's why basically, so the lack of markets So the lack of market or the presence of market is very, very important. So if the farmers do not find a market, even though the irrigation project increase production, productivity, even though we have the market structure there, if there is no market, if there is no buyer, then the farmer lose interest from the commercial farming. So it's important factor really to look at. Yeah. The third lesson is the technical design of this irrigation scheme are very, very important. We found that really there are some irrigation scheme which have with some faulty irrigation design where as a result, the irrigation schemes are underutilized because of that. There is a good example here we can again show around Blantyre where the irrigation scheme works perfect, as I said, in the Malambe, but it couldn't cover all the land under irrigation because of some, problems with the design. So if we solve those things, if the government solves those areas, it could have been, increased. So as due to this technical fault, it's just working at suboptimal. So we didn't achieve really higher, the level we want to achieve. So there are many examples of this kind of there. So if they may not need much investment sometimes, the government can just make follow-up and fix the problems and then put them into operational. Good. The fourth lesson is about really women empowerment in irrigation projects. These are very, very important. As I said, women are the one who improve the welfare of the household compared to the male-headed households. And the poverty reduction is more, happen in the female households, but the total income generated is more within the family's male-headed household. This is an important factor to find how we can really balance. So women, it's not only participation in training and so on, access to land and finance is also important for women farmers to further, maximize the benefit out of this. So in designing the future, let's focus also how we can influence access to resources for women in order to enhance the impact. The last one is about really child and nutrition. Particularly, nutrition is an important factor nowadays. As you know, child nutrition is very important, and the bank is doing a lot of work around that. So if particularly we think that we are going to influence nutrition through irrigation and our agricultural development, we have to give focus on what are the main factors affect child nutrition beyond only making food available. Because we found here that food security is improved, food diversity is improved, but it didn't translate into child nutrition, because this has to do with the education of the mother, how food is prepared, how the breastfeeding situation. All these are very important factors. So in the future, when we design a particular irrigation project or agricultural project to influence child nutrition, we have to focus on the dynamics of how food is really reached to the children, not only availability, but how we can influence that. Here, I just want to mention that on nutrition, we measure the impact using the anthropometric measures, such as stunting, wasting, and underweight. So overall, this is what we have. Thank you very much. And again, as I said at the beginning, please go to the report on our website and then dig into more of the nitty-gritties, and feel free to send me an email or ask a question now if you need more elaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Girma. Just a quick point of information, there is a French interpretation which is available. So our colleagues who are French speaking can click on the interpretation button to get the French interpretation. Thank you so much, Girma, for a comprehensive and informative presentation, which gave us a better understanding of the factors that affect the development outcomes of irrigation projects and other agricultural and water management projects. As you recommended, I encourage participants to get a copy of the report for more details of the key findings you have presented. The 5 lessons you have shared indeed are beneficial for agriculture and water management operations in Malawi and other regional offices. As you mentioned, as it was mentioned by our acting country manager, these lessons and the recommendations have already been implemented, and they've already influenced a positive change at the country level and at the sector as well. We'll see this in the next presentation, which will demonstrate how at the country level this knowledge is taken into consideration and applied in processes and ongoing and future operations within the country. To give this presentation is none than Vinda Kisombie, our senior agriculture economist from Malawi Country Office. Vinda, the floor is yours. Over to you, Vinda.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Maria. As Maria has rightly presented, what I am going to focus on is actually based on the area presentation by Girma. Having received the findings from the evaluation which was conducted in the country, we then went into how are those findings actually being integrated into the bank interventions in Malawi. Coincidentally, you will note that in my presentation, some of the actions found by the evaluation were already also realized or noted during our project completion reports of the same projects. So some of the activities actually are already ongoing because we already had also indicators from the PCRs. I will briefly, for this purpose of this being a bank-wide presentation, go through the country context, then what is support of the bank to Malawi, overview of the agriculture sector, and then I'll proceed to learning from the IDEV evaluation for future operations. Of course, this includes the ongoing ones, as I've mentioned, based on the informed outcomes from the PCRs. Then recommendation and action, and I come to conclusion. On the country context is just to share with you that Malawi is a landlocked country, and it shares borders with Mozambique, Zambia, and Tanzania, with a land size of 118,500 square meters, about. Interestingly, 20% of this area is actually underwater, and that underscores the significance of why Malawi has to put it on a priority in terms of investing in irrigation. We have a population of about 18 million, and then also 52% being women. I'm referring to the gender issues raised by my colleague, that we have a very high population of women, and then we have about 49% of population which are youth that are less than 18 years. But when we go up to 35, the figures shoot to over 70% of the population. So you can see that Malawi has a youthful population. And then we have the natural resources, very much abundant resources, which is an opportunity for Malawi to invest further in irrigation with an average per capita GDP of $324 US, according to the analysis of 2017. The bank has been supporting the agriculture sector through the CSP, current one, 2018 to 2022, and of course aligned to the bank's 10-year strategy, as well as the high five priorities. The key pillars for the current CSP is to invest in infrastructure development through energy and transport, and also investing in economic transformation by strengthening agricultural value chains and developing water infrastructure. Cumulatively, about UA 1.4 billion has been invested in the agriculture sector in Malawi, of which 268 million has been for the agriculture sector. The bank also supports priorities for the government on job creation, commercialization, value addition, and export diversification through ongoing projects as outlined below. I think there are a number of projects. I will not go mentioning them, but you can read at your own time. These are the current operations in the agriculture sector, which the bank is supporting. The country has about 80% of the workforce relying on agriculture and contributes about 27%, to the agriculture sector contributes about 27% to the GDP, according to the annual economic report of 2019. The sector itself is dualistic in nature. It has two subsectors: the smallholder farmers with less than 2 hectares, which contributes, they are in majority contributing about 70% of the total agricultural production in the country. And then we have the estate sector, which is greater than 5 hectares. So of course, you might question what happens in between. I think they are also classified as estates, but those are transitional farmers. Then we have the rain-fed agriculture. The sector is dominated by rain-fed, and which makes it very vulnerable to weather. And of course, it is a maize-based. In Malawi, when you talk of food, they mean maize. And possibly this explains about the nutrition issue, because it is quite dominated in the diet of Malawians. Then we have irrigation development, which is very low according to Irrigation Master Plan, which was done in 2015. Only 104,000, apologies there, 104,000 out of 400,000 hectares, which have been developed for irrigation. So there is room for further investment in the irrigation in the country. In general, the sector is guided by the National Agriculture Policy, which was approved in 2016, as well as National Irrigation Plan, and then also National Agriculture Investment Plan, which is NAIP, that is guiding the sector. And not to forget to mention that these are aligned to the IDEV. I've just singled a few bright areas, including below there, which I've also, I think, mentioned in the area slide, but also to underscore that there is too much focus on the maize. As you see that we now have the Affordable Input Subsidy Program, which is targeting 4.3 million smallholder farmers, almost all smallholder farmers, starting from this year. And then still the emphasis on commercialization and value addition remains priority agenda in the agricultural sector, as described in the National Agricultural Policy. To share with you some challenges and which may make you appreciate how we are addressing these as we move on with our agricultural intervention in the country. We have the poor access to farm inputs and equipment, and the access to credit, as well as markets area on presented by my colleague. The farm inputs issue is a big issue in Malawi, and this is why I referred to the Affordable Farm Input Subsidy as a government strategy to address that one, but it's falling short on the machinery aspect. We have rain-fed farming dominated in the presented area on again, and we have a very unreliable weather, and also deforestation of the natural resources, which is resulting into Malawi experiencing year in, year out declaration of national disaster in the country. Then we have the land holding size, which are on average less than 0.8 hectares per farming family, and which is also at a national level. And in addition to this, we also have a lot of land degradation taking place in the country. We have limited value addition, emphasis on the standards and quality control. We have inadequate standards, and well, I think it's duplicated. And then we have institutional capacity. We have a very big problem in the Ministry of Agriculture in particular, with a very low level of staffing compared to what is desired in the structure of the ministry. Very weak coordination. Agriculture requires multi-sectoral approach, and there's a very poor coordination between the ministry and the other sister ministries as well as departments. And then the gender mainstreaming issue is still also very weak. We have the problem of weak farm organizations, also alluded to by Girma in the presentation, which we are also addressing in our interventions. And also the poor road infrastructure, the feeder roads, the markets, as well as the sewage facility and ICT. These are some of the challenges which affect the agriculture sector in the country. And the number of them, as I proceed with my presentation, you will note that the ADB interventions are trying to address them. Now, coming to learning from the sorry, I had an interruption. Learning from the IDEV evaluation for future operations. I have presented it in a way where I'm looking at what are the weaknesses. Some of them are those findings which my colleague has presented. And then on the right column where I'm looking at what are we doing in terms of addressing those issues. We have a problem of extension services. I think lack of extension services in the country, the poor governance and land conflicts resulting into low or non-utilization of irrigation facilities, and then also lack of ownership and effective leadership of irrigation schemes by farmers. These are some of issues which have been noted even from our PCR. And as a result, we have already taken steps to look into these. The current projects provided resources to outsource extension services. This is to address the shortfall of the services within the ministry on best agronomic practices, establishment of governance institutions such as water use association and cooperatives. I've cited the case of the smallholder irrigation and value addition project, SIVA, where we had a full-time NGO providing extension services. And then we also have IAP, where we also have a number of consulting services which are actually going to support the implementation of the activities. The Shire Valley Transformation Program, SVPT-1, what it means is Shire Valley Transformation Program Phase 1. Under this project, detailed studies were conducted to address socioeconomic and technical design issues. They designed fully articulated farmer institutional development and capacity building. And this also included a professional service contractor who will be managing the irrigation water infrastructure on cost recovery basis. I think in the area presentation, it was mentioned about the weak organization of the farmers and the issue of dependency on inputs. I think with this arrangement, we feel it will address the institutional aspects of managing the irrigation schemes. And there was also a lot of consultation to come up with this one. And this has already brought in a lot of buy-in from the local leaders as well as the farmers themselves into the project, which will address the issue of ownership as well. Weak farm organization and inadequate capacity building and beneficiaries dependency syndromes. Of course, the item is more restricted with the previous one, but I just want to emphasize that the recent projects have included components on support to farmer institutions, with resources earmarked for farmer training, farm equipment, starter packs for farm inputs, and establishment of more viable farmer organizations to be run by professional staff. Because others have been outsourced to complement the existing staff in supporting the farm organizations. I have an example of IAP, which is Agriculture Infrastructure and Youth in Agribusiness Project. again, the Chile Valley transformation and the smallholder irrigation and value addition. Maybe one would question the use of the farm input starter packs versus the dependency syndrome. I think this has been also quite a debate that by providing that, we are promoting that aspect. But I think the approach in this one is far much different. For example, in the Chile Valley Transformation Program, we're not talking of these 10 hectares, 2 hectares, 5 hectares. We're talking of huge cooperatives that will be running these schemes with a minimum between 500 hectares to 1,000 hectares, and that cannot degenerate into the dependency syndrome issue. Then we have an issue of conflicts among beneficiaries in scheme and water management. This, again, we have mentioned that in the new design for IAP, for example, the availability of water or water scarcity is found as a common issue in most of the schemes, and this leads to the conflicts which are highlighted. So in this case, for example, the agricultural infrastructure and use in agribusiness, we included a catchment subcomponent upstream using parallel financing of 2 million euros from European Union. And this was actually to ensure that the water is conserved upstream, while we are also introducing adequate measures to ensure that the distribution of the water flow in the downstream is also adequate. Similarly, under the Chile Valley Transformation Program, it has an elaborate subcomponent on watershed management. And this is to ensure that the water is available in the scheme. Of course, apart from this, there are issues of the design, which I'm going to talk about, the faulted designs, which in some cases have resulted into leakages of water and making the water insufficient because of the leakage of water in the conveyance system to the irrigation scheme. Hello, I don't know, I cannot move my slide to the next one.
Okay, let me check if I can quickly project my.
Okay, I think I have made it.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the next one I think is about markets, where my colleague talked about the constructing the markets themselves is not an adequate solution, but rather we should look at the development of the linkages of the actors along the value chains. And this is what has been done a lot. We down there, I'm displaying a market, of course, which is an evidence of what Girma presented, where we have a market structure that is not yet being utilized. That's a market depot constructed under AISP. The improvements and innovations which are on the ongoing project include, in the CVAP, we introduced what we call the agricultural agro-processing centers, agro-processing value centers. And in these centers, there are established infrastructure is constructed, that's the building and all the relevant accessory facilities, the drying spaces and things like that for crops and all those things. And then we also have installed the appropriate processing equipment, depending on the priority in the particular site where the value addition center is located. And this is meant to add value as well as a secure market for the farmers, because they are quite high quality equipment. For example, rice milling equipment is stored there. Most farmers are flocking to these value addition centers to market their rice produce, for example. So it has helped to link up the producers and also even those who are coming to buy from this particular facility. We have the information communication technology value chain governance platform. This is an electronic platform which is linking buyers and producers. The project provided cell phones to some local leaders and the extension agents so that the farmers can effectively link themselves to the platform, and then the buyers can link them to access their produce. And in addition to this one, what is interesting on this one is that it also has facilities for extension messages. Access to finance is also linked to financial institutions, and it's a very actually important platform that has been introduced under this project. And the ministry has already adopted it to be part of its agricultural information market system, AMIS. We also have use of market structures developed under the previous bank finance scheme. If you read the evaluation report my colleague referred to, it will indicate there are a lot of schemes which were not utilized. And then the question also is being raised in that by the management. What are you doing about those old schemes? So this is one of the action which has already been taken, is to take on board some of those schemes to be utilized, to be used under a new intervention with a different approach. Then we have the agricultural infrastructure and youth in agribusiness, which I'm abbreviating here as IAP. The design has included the establishment of the risk-sharing facility. This is a facility where the agripreneurs will be able to access loans in kind, not in cash, and then make it available to, the facility will make those loans available for them to process and participate in the value chain of the respective crops. And it also has an enable youth component for agripreneurs, which is being managed by the Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, training the agripreneurs that will participate in this system. And we have now the Shire Valley Transformation Program, which will establish smallholder owned commercial farm enterprises. In some cases referred to as smallholder farmers companies. They'll be like companies that will, which is also emphasizing on market linkages promotion. So these will be linked to the off-takers, the private sector, which have actually shown interest in this particular activity. My colleague Chuma will elaborate when he comes to talk about the special agro of land, and they will also finalize the land policy brief, which will also help to inform the future, the current as well as the future programs, and also the financing options, identify financing options for the implementation based on the recommended actions. And then on access to market, I think there are the issues which are already presented there. The establishment of risk sharing facility. I advise government to utilize the market depot, and the timeframes have been indicated there. These activities have already highlighted up there. The only improvement here is that I'm indicating by what time should we do this. And we expect to mobilize resources for diagnostic study and identify co-financing options for special agro-processing zone. My colleague Chuma will elaborate on that one. And finally, on the dialogue, as already the acting country manager indicated, this is the first step towards dialogue. After this discussion, we'll be having a similar session with the government, development partners, and other stakeholders. And then we'll also ensure that the outcome of the land policy brief, gender profile study, and irrigation impact evaluation inform the CSP, the current one, and future operations in the sector. And also conduct the child nutrition and health study. Thanks very much. I think I should conclude by saying the current actions on the ongoing operations is yielding positive results already indicated by my colleague. For example, in SIVA, and the outcomes of the evaluation will inform the MTR, and that the outcomes will also inform the review and design during the MTR of the current operations. Evaluation will provide evidence-based information to government to revisit the previous bank finance operations and accommodate them in the next programming. Thank you very much for your attention. This is all what I had for you.
Thank you so much, Vinda. Just a point of information to all our participants. We continue to receive questions in the chat box, and the presenters will respond to those questions during Q&A session. Again, Vinda, thank you so much for another informative and comprehensive presentation. which demonstrated how Malawi Country Office is working on the lessons and recommendations from the evaluation, especially in applying them on the ongoing and future operations. One of the recommendations from the evaluation is the need to enhance agricultural market access. You have presented some of the innovations which focuses on enhancing market linkages and value addition, including the establishment of 7 agro-processing centers as one way of maximizing the benefits from the irrigation projects. Thank you so much, Vinda. Now, to take us through in understanding on this, how these markets are going to be enhanced, is the presentation which is titled Special Agro-Industrial Processes Zone, Maximizing the Benefits for Irrigations, which will now take us through what works, what doesn't work, and why when we design our agro-processing zones and when we plan them and we develop them. To give us this presentation is none than Chuma Ezedinwa, who is the principal agricultural economist from AHFR2. Chuma, the floor is yours, and over to you, Chuma.
Thank you very much, Marealle. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk specifically on special agro-industrial processing zones as a way of maximizing the benefits from the irrigation projects in Malawi and basically also other countries. The outline of the presentation is divided into 3. We will talk about the concept and rationale of special agro-industrial processing zones. We'll talk about how the bank is actually implementing this in terms of the bank's project cycle. We'll talk about the interventions on special agro-industrial processing zones, which we have done in some regional member countries. Special agro-industrial processing zone is actually a flagship of the Feed Africa strategy. They are agro-based spatial development initiatives that are designed to concentrate agro-processing activities within areas of high agricultural potential to boost productivity and integrate production, processing, marketing of selected commodities. They may or may not be designated as special agro-industrial and special economic zones. But the most important thing is that they are shared facilities used to reduce transaction costs and share business development services to be able to increase productivity and competitiveness. By bringing in this economic infrastructure, especially energy, water, roads, information and communication technology, we strive to attract private sector investments in rural areas and also bring in social development in the same areas. Now, one of the major reasons why we undertake special agro-industrial processing zones is because Africa's food imports have become unsustainable. And just in 2017 alone, the African continent imported $75 billion of food. Currently, the special agro-industrial processing zone focuses on 18 commodities of the Feed Africa strategy. And you know that the Feed Africa strategy also has other flagships like the Technology for African Agricultural Transformation and Jobs for Youth, and so many others. Now, basically, the concept spans not just the Feed Africa strategy, but also tries to improve the quality of life of people in Africa and also industrialize Africa. These are the 3 basic high fives that it actually supports. The agro-industrial processing zones is actually a rural development strategy, an agricultural transformation strategy, and a spatial development strategy. But what is important is for you to understand that you must have been hearing our president talking about government-enabled, private sector-led. And what that means is that the key actors in this process, the key actors in this process are the government, who are the enablers, who must champion the process, own the process, provide leadership in the process, and also provide some financial support in terms of for logistics purposes and for infrastructure purposes, and provide the enabling environment in terms of regulation, incentives, and business support. Government also is required to at least collaborate with international partners like the bank and ensure that there is participation from small and medium-scale enterprises, what we call inclusivity, and of course ensure that its training and vocational educational systems are sufficient to be able to provide the skills that are required. On the private sector side, we also expect investments, technology, employment creation, skills development, especially with respect to incubation centers, provide industrial approach, and of course provides social corporate responsibility. Now, the agro-industrial zones itself provides several other outcomes that are listed on the right-hand side of the diagram that is presented. What are we trying to achieve through special agro-industrial zones? One is to increase food production, increase value addition, create jobs, facilitate linkages between agricultural value chains, the actors in the agricultural value chain, promote investments in agribusiness, and you cannot create jobs without investments. This is very critical. And then promote local, regional, and international trade, increase agriculture's contribution to GDP, and bring infrastructure to rural areas. This is a spatial development aspect. Now, this particular slide, we have been talking about irrigation. And agro-industrialization requires critical increase in productivity. But what irrigation gives us is the ability for us to produce several crops cycles within 1 year. And that is what is required for the consistent supply of agricultural raw material for the agro-industries to utilize. Otherwise, the plants will stand idle or become underutilized. Since irrigation gives us this capacity, we are saying in the case of Malawi, for example, that it is possible to utilize the existing irrigation schemes and even the future irrigation schemes in the country to be able to industrialize agriculture in the country. But this also must be complemented with agricultural production inputs, seeds, fertilizers, mechanization, capacity building and credit, and so on. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is that the special agro-industrial processing zone is an end-to-end approach to agricultural development. A few days ago, I was talking to somebody and I told him that as long as we do not put on the processing agro-industrial factories, the whole agricultural value chain is incomplete. We need to increase agricultural productivity. We need to aggregate, provide facilities for aggregation and post-harvest. We need to provide infrastructure, on-site infrastructure in the agro-industrial hub. And we need to locate the agro-industrial hubs in areas where there is possibility and capacity to improve trade, highways, railways, airports, seaports, and so on. A couple of other things that are important when it comes to developing agro-industrial zones is the social infrastructure is built into it. policy institutions are critical. Skills development, because there are new technologies and new ways of doing things, are also critical. We need to be inclusive, and we need to make sure that we crowd in the private sector. So, the special agro-industrial processing zones basically provides a guaranteed market to farmers. And when I mean farmers, I'm talking of whether they are big or small, micro. All farmers can and will be able to include them in trying to provide surplus output to agro-industrial factories for either export purposes or for import substitution. The agro-industrial processing zones therefore provides and ensures a market for any size of farmer. So how do we do this? Basically, we try to align the farmer's interests with the private sector interests. As you know, the way we are currently building our agricultural system, we are taking a supply-driven approach, which is basically adding value or trying to push to add value. We also need to bring in the private sector. And what the private sector does is to capture value. But then it needs to be organized in such a way that the departments or ministries that are in charge of agriculture and industry are in coordination, basically because many of the incentives and regulations for investments in agro-industry are actually sitting in the Department or Ministry of Agro-Industry, while then agriculture itself is mainly focused on production issues. It is time now to begin to bring in this coordination to be able to take advantage of private sector investments. And basically, the whole process, like we had said from the very beginning, must be private sector led. How do we do this? First, we begin to bring them in the management of the parks, and even in the management of the rural transformation centers. I will explain that in a later slide. And this is where the private sector has an advantage, and we'll be able to, they also have an advantage in the marketing and logistics. And this is where it is critical for them, for us to utilize the private sector to drive the process. So, what are the critical success factors? I'm now going to talk about this in line with our experiences so far. One of the most important critical factor in the success factor is the fact that we have to ensure that there is a national action plan that supports and provides an enabling environment for investments. And there is also a regulatory institution or bodies that ensure private sector participation as well as public sector participation. The second issue is coordination and institutional arrangements. Emphasis is on coordination. Personal experience has shown that there is usually mandate issues between agriculture ministry, industry ministry, and so on, energy and so on. But because coordination is critical, it means that all activities related to the development of special agro-industrial zones is not entirely within the purview of agriculture, which is why in our designs, we try as much as possible to have what we call a champion, which sits a little above the two ministries or the other ministries. Sometimes that coordinator or champion is usually in some countries the president of the country or the president's office. Sometimes it is the vice president. But we need to have someone who has the capacity to convene the interministerial team to be able to support the process, champion the process. Third success factor is smart infrastructure. Infrastructure that we put on the ground is usually done in a way that it should be fit for purpose, meaning that we do not build a factory shells in the agro-industrial hub. It is not really necessary. What we do is to put infrastructure, what we call horizontal or economic infrastructure, in a way that it is plug and play. Energy, water, roads, everything is designed in such a way. I'm going to show it in the next three slides, how this is done. The other issue is incentives. How do you bring in the private sector? Experience also shows that it is possible to switch your tax regimes in such a way that the private sector may not pay tax for some time, and then at some point in time, they start paying tax, for example. And there's so many regimes, so many incentives that can be used. In the case of Ethiopia, for example, they said, the private sector, come and invest in the agro-industrial hub, don't pay for the land, rent, and so on. But these are issues that should be country specific. Then there's the issue of building up the value chains from the farm, from actually before the farm, which is the input dealers, all the way. Then the issue of access to finance. I'll tell a little bit of experience here. A lot of people believe that small farmers are not financeable. We cannot finance them. That is not true. Our experience has showed that small farmers, once they have agreements, what we call optical agreements with industries, you will see the banks running to them. That optical agreement is enough for the bank collateral to provide financing of small farmers and also big farmers. Now, in the bank process, there are two stages in which we take very careful interest, and that is at the identification phase and at the preparation phase. At the identification phase, we must ensure that the institutional framework is there, the policy, the regulations are in existence in the country before we can then, and of course, before we even move to the next stage, the government must provide a site or sites for the agro-industrial zones. In the preparation stage, we have to do master plans, designs, full feasibility studies, environmental and social impact assessment. This is the most critical, reason being that all special agro-industrial processing zone projects are category 1 projects and require a minimum of 120 days disclosure. And of course, we have to deal with issues of land, settlement action plan, and so on. Now, in our definition, we have said that special agro-industrial zones are designed to concentrate agro-processing activities within areas of high agricultural potential. If you look at the diagram, you will see there's a red dot in the center. We usually do what is called a spider web analysis to assess the logistics advantage or locational advantage of the site. And then on the basis of that, we take the decision as to whether we should invest or not. We also look at all other resources for production, irrigation facilities, water facilities, and so on. But the most important point for you to understand is the fact that location matters. Because those that have been able to leverage location advantages, including access to large agricultural production areas, cheap labor, and trade access, are usually successful. Now, this diagram shows the configuration of an agro-industrial, special agro-industrial processing zone, the way we configure it in the bank. There are a few differences, for example. But for now, let me just say here that you have the agro-processing hub on the left side of the diagram. You have the agricultural transformation centers located within it. You can see the circles, the red circles in the center are the agricultural transformation centers. And even within the agricultural transformation centers, you still have at the village level aggregation centers. Now, for South Africa, for example, they have what they call the agricultural transformation centers has a different name. They call it farmer production support units. The aggregation centers actually act as a farmer production support unit as well as a finishing center before commodities are aggregated from the aggregation centers and cleaned out and moved to the agro-industrial hub. So basically, this is the way the configuration is. Now, I have said something about fit for purpose. When we are planning and designing and implementing special agro-industrial zones, we do it in phased development. Resources are never usually complete. So we have to either phase the agro-industrial hub in such a way that you can first do an investment. When you begin to get tenants, you can then move on to a second development and of course to a third development. In some countries also, the social infrastructure, which in this map is actually at the bottom, which are the housing facilities, religious, sports, swimming pool, games facilities, these also can be contracted out to a private contractor. But that is when they begin to get occupancy in the first phase and in the second phase. Now, the design, the plotting of the parks is done in such a way that it is inclusive. You have 1 hectare plots, 2 hectare plots, 10 hectare plots, 20 hectare plots, but that is because you are looking at factories that are large or factories that are small. It is designed in a size and services mode with a plug and play facilities per plot. And that also includes even the social infrastructure. Now, this is just an aerial view. I will not spend much time on this. So where are we? Where has the bank done special agro-industrial processing zones? Over the last 3-4 years, we have approved activities going on, projects going on in 5 countries: Guinea, Senegal, Mali, and Ethiopia and Togo. In Ethiopia, we have 4 sites running concurrently. And then in the countries that are in green, we have designs going on currently. I want to point out here that there are 2 projects designs that are going on in Mozambique, which are close to Malawi, the Beira corridor and the Nacala corridor. The reason I'm showing this slide is because we're already beginning to see some success stories just within a very short period of time. But the most important thing about this slide is just to show you how much benefits farmers are getting, or how much benefits the agro-industrial processing zone has been able to provide through just 1 factory located in the Sidama region in Ethiopia. That factory currently employs 350 permanent and temporary jobs, but it benefits 73,000 farmers directly. I saw this myself. The reason is because the gentleman who set up the Salvador avocado oil factory decided on his own to employ his own extension agents who go to provide seeds and provide climbing tools for farmers. Now, when I'm talking about these 73,000 farmers, none of them planted avocado in what I would call modern technique. These were avocado trees that were planted in their compounds. And so it's not a matter of high-tech agriculture. It's more of a matter of ability to link within the value chain. That same park in Sidama region is currently witnessing a very high volume of interest from the Chinese and Italian investors. And the park to date has been able to employ 14,000 people. When you talk about employment, there is no other way that you can build up in employment without investment in agro-industrial processing zones.
Excuse me, Chuma, I'm requesting you to summarize a little bit.
I'm
Time
finished.
is not on our side.
It's finished already. So our focus in the bank is basically in the special agro-industrial processes thus far is on infrastructure and skills. But we also do policy and regulatory environment work. We also try as much as possible to help countries crowd in the private sector and enhance productivity and competitiveness amongst farmers. Moving forward, and this is my last slide, the bank, like Vinda had said, will strive to upscale activities in the agro sector to maximize the benefits of existing and future irrigation facilities and expand markets for farmers using the special agro-industrial process zone concept, as well as seek proceed with a dialogue with other development partners to see if we can have co-financing opportunities for the development of special agro-industrial processing zones in Malawi. This will be triggered, of course, by government interests through a letter of request. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chuma. Just a point of information to our participants. There's a link which has been posted on the chat box for you to share the feedback on the event to help us improve on other future events. Please click the link and provide your feedback. Again, Chuma, thank you so much for another comprehensive and informative presentation, which demonstrated SCPZ's intentions. You have mentioned them, and you have already reminded us of SCPZ key success factors, which include the fact that increased productivity is critical to agro-industrialization. This is just one of them. Thank you so much, Chuma, for that presentation. I would like now to inform our participants that we are now moving into the Q&A session. We had 3 presentations. The first one was by Girma on the lessons learned. The second one was by Vinda, describing how the country office and the sector is applying the lessons and recommendations. And the third one by Chuma, actually demonstrating how one of the recommendation, which has already been, which is in the process or it's currently under development in Malawi and other areas within the sector, on what works well, what doesn't work, and how. So these are the 3 presentations which we had, and you are all invited to direct your questions to any of the presenters who will be happy to respond to your questions. We have taken note of the questions which are posted on the chat box, and we will also request those who would like to speak on their own or by themselves to raise their hands, and we will invite them to give their questions on their own. But please try to be concise when you're invited to ask a question so that we can accommodate all the questions from all the participants. While we are waiting for the hands to be raised, I would like to start by reading the questions which were posted on the chat box. The first question came from Mohammed, and Mohammed is asking, what are the marketing infrastructure unused? Like, what are the unused infrastructure? And this was mentioned in Vinda's presentation, and I'll give this question to Vinda. The second question, I will read the 2 questions we have received so far, and then will be responded by the presenters while we are waiting for colleagues or participants to raise their questions. The second question came from Ramadhani Salum, and he's asking that the presentation indicates that irrigation and marketing infrastructure have not been utilized optimally. What were the causes and the lesson, and what should future similar interventions avoid this particular scenario as a lesson? And all these 2 questions are related to those unused infrastructure. And I would dedicate the same question to Vinda. Over to you, Vinda.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. The question was, what are the unused structures? I think on that question, I would say the projects being evaluated had constructed 13 market centers. These are markets where farmers and the buyers can meet for the marketing of their produce. And some of these 13 market centers, actually a good number of them, were not used. I think these are in the evaluation report findings in terms of the numbers. I may not right away now say so many of them, but in the report it is stated which markets were not used. And then the other type of markets were communal storage facilities. These were facilities constructed just next to the irrigation scheme, so that once they harvest, they hold their produce in that particular structure before they take it out to the market. And then the other structures under AISP was a market depot, which I actually showed in my presentation, a very beautiful market which is presented there. But the ministry up to now is struggling to identify what I can call a company to use that infrastructure in the marketing of the agricultural produce. That's one depot. And there were also other 3 market centers which were constructed in some of the schemes. Although the market centers, some of them were, I think, under AISP, I think they are functioning because they are constructed within the market environment already. So it was like an addition to the infrastructure which was already there. So in terms of the causes and why they are not utilized, for example, the market under scheme, some of them, there was a conflict of location. The scheme happens, let's say, to be 60 kilometers away from the main trading, the main road, or where people can easily come to buy the produce. I think they designed, then they decided to put the market along the road, but very far away from where the produce is. I have a case of a market center, a big one, which is not functioning along the road to Blantyre. So we also have, the depot I've talked about. So in terms of what lessons, I think the lessons is what have been actually presented by Girma, and I think I have attempted to respond in terms of how we are addressing some of these market infrastructures. For example, the under scheme, some of the market infrastructures have been incorporated or have been annexed to the agro-processing structures under the follow-up project, which was CIVA. I think this is how some of those unused infrastructures have been used. In terms of the communal storage facilities, most of them are being used because actually where cooperatives are functional, as the report says, they are able to use it to keep their produce before they take it for marketing, and some of them they are using it as a part of the cooperative. They buy produce from the people and then assemble it in those community storage facilities. I think the main issue to me is think about the location, and then we have to think about the cooperatives that were put in place to manage these infrastructure. These have to be some of the key things to be looked at whenever we're introducing into these new projects. And then, how do we link these markets to the private sector so that there is a chain from the producers to the buyers and then exporters and so forth? I think these are some of the issues when you look at the project we're implementing. We have actually highlighted them, some of them, how we are trying to bring it on board to improve on the utilization of this market infrastructure. Irrigation infrastructure, I think the follow-up question also included irrigation. Irrigation infrastructure, yes, there are issues which have come out, like I mentioned that the 40 irrigation system where you find that once the irrigation is finalized, then it is realized that there are certainly in the conveyor system, we have a lot of leakage points and things like that. So that affects the amount of water to go into the scheme for distribution to farmers. So in the current projects we are doing, actually, we are detecting some of those things at a very early stage. And then when, like in CVAP, we managed to engage another contractor to fix all those problems which actually were experienced in those schemes. So ideally, that is what I would call firefighting. We would rather deal with this at the plan. The problem is the designs themselves, I think, which are being utilized in some cases, they have some weak points which need to be improved. So what we need is at the design stage, we need to carefully look into what features. Unfortunately, I cannot go into those details. I'm not an engineer, but the engineer in the mission should make sure that he really addresses these ahead of implementation.
Thank you very much, Vinda, for that clarification, as well as areas whereby when dealing with such issues, areas that needs to be looked at and areas which we need to avoid in order to avoid the same thing to happen. We have one question from Debazau Yantio. Debazau Yantio, over to you for you to present your question. The floor
thank
is
you.
yours.
Thank you very much, Maria. And I would also like to thank Girma, Vinda, and I think it's Chuma, who presented the special agro-processing zones. It was really, really interesting to listen to them. My question is to Vinda. You said the approach that the Mali office is promoting now is to outsource extension. But during his presentation, I mentioned that he indicated that the Ministry of Agriculture was being short of staff. So my question is, how are they going to find the extensionists to provide the service as a private provider? So where are they looking at, where are they finding those extensionists to whom they are going to outsource the extension services? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Maria, can I respond right away?
Yes, Vinda, you can go on and respond.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much. You are very right that there is a shortage of staff in the ministry. Actually, to be very specific, it's a very sad situation that the vacancy rate is around 50% or so, and which is very high. Now, where do we get the service providers? In my presentation, I actually mentioned that we engaged a non-governmental organization. We have a lot of non-governmental organizations in the country under the umbrella of CISANET, Civil Society Agriculture Network, which are specifically specialized in agricultural activities. And in this case, this includes the provision of extension services. So where we get them, we indeed get them from the market. We advertise as the procedures, they compete, and then we get the NGO that can actually come in and support the project in terms of providing extension services. We had a very good result from the Omozi consulting firm, to be specific to mention it, where the farmers were even saying, why is the contract ending area? We have really benefited from this group. The idea of getting this, of course, raises the question of sustainability as well, because we are taking people from outside to come and do the work and then they go. But the question here is we have an immediate problem where the vacancy rate is very high, the extension staff are very limited on the ground, and you just leave everything for them to do. I think you get very little results. So we bring in the NGOs, but in the process, they work together with those the few extension staff. They are also appreciated at the end when this NGO is leaving that we have gained one or two things from these NGOs. So this is how I think I can respond. We get them from the market through competitive process.
Thank you so much, Vinda, for that response. I can see we don't have any other question, whether from the chat box or from the hands. Before we will now move into the next session, and before we move into the closing remarks, I would like to invite the Malawi country manager, Eyerusalem, to give us a statement following the presentations and the few discussions we had. Welcome, Madam Eyerusalem. The floor is yours.
Sorry, Maria, to interject, but I see one question in the Q&A chat that has just come in. Maybe it's something we could have addressed before Madam Eyerusalem takes over.
Okay, that is very fine, but okay, maybe I missed that question.
It just came in. It just came in. Can you see it? Or should I read it?
Maybe you can read it. I don't see.
No problem. I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Kazim Ogudele, for the question. The question is, for the Malawi Agro project being presented, at what point was IDEV involved during the project cycle? That is at the identification, design, implementation, or completion. So I think this would go to Girma.
Sorry, I was disconnected, and could you repeat the question for me? I just joined.
Yes, please, I'll go again, Girma. The question is from Kazim Ogdele. The question is, for the Malawi Agro project being presented, at what point was IDEV involved during the project cycle? That is it at identification, design, implementation, or completion? Have you got it, Girma?
Well, sorry, can the project we evaluated is it the grow processing or what? Because it's not clear for me. The question is not clear. Please repeat for me.
We could still have maybe an intervention from Eyerusalem. Huh? We can have
that would be fine. I can respond to this. Sorry, if you don't mind, Girma. Actually, as this is an impact evaluation, IDEV was involved after the project was completed. As you may have heard me during my opening statement, we received the IDEV mission in 2019, to review these two projects that were presented in Girma's session, in Girma's presentation. However, these projects were already completed in 2014 and in another one in 2017. So there was already time to do the impact evaluation. So yes, it was after completion and sometimes even after completion. I hope that answers the question. And
thank you, Eyerusalem. And before maybe I invite again Eyerusalem, I would like to confirm from my colleagues, the panelists, if you see any question, because unfortunately the last one didn't appear on my chat box. Can you confirm that we don't have any other question which is left out? Would like to have all the questions responded. Yes, we have a question from Yaya Koloma. And the question reads, hello. The increase in maize production and yield is due to several factors, including fertilizers, improved seed, etc. How were the evaluators able to circumscribe the context of the study around irrigation? I think
this question is for me, so I can respond.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's a very good question. This is basically we separated the use of input in our model. We have separate variable for the use of fertilizer, the use of improved seeds. So it's already, we controlled that in our equation if we go to the the detail of the report. So that's why we only we separated this in our model so that it will not intervene into the irrigation infrastructures. So they have a separate variable which was captured in our question, because we know how much each household use the fertilizer, how much improved seed, and we know the size of the land they use. So in that case, we really took into account in that to avoid, otherwise it's going to be, it may be due to fertilizer, improved seed, and so on. But in our models, took into account this in order to address them separately. Definitely, this is a standard actually, because we have to look at very separately. Not only household, fertilizer, improved seed, household characteristics, all this matters. So we have done with this adequately. And please, I can forward you the report, or please, or maybe download from our IDEV website. It clearly indicated for in annex for the variables that we took into account in estimating the impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Girma. There's a follow-up question from the same participant, Yaya Koloma. He asks that to what extent do evaluators ensure that indigenous bias, attrition, and other factors, biases are reduced? This is a follow-up question from Yaya Koloma.
I think it's almost related, because since we control for this variable, we don't see any intervention. But in terms of bias, particularly, that's why we used the this endogenous switching regression and inverted probability weighting score, because these are the methodologies that helps us reduce particularly the endogenous bias, which comes due to the participation in the irrigation schemes. Because some farmers simply participate since they see, okay, irrigation is going to increase income. Without adequate motivation, they may just participate since irrigation available and so on. So at the end, it will affect our variables. So particularly if you look at the nature of, or if you are familiar with the indigenous switching regression model, they are taking into account this bias. They reduce as much as possible those biases from observed as well as from unobserved variable, particularly the variable or unobserved characteristics, the one we don't know. We don't know why the farmer is motivated to participate. Sometimes you can measure, like improved seed, household characteristics, like household size, education, so on. But there are other underlying factors that we can't capture. But this switching endogenous regression model is, from the name, it's called endogenous. It helps to address those issues and reduce the bias. But again, it does not reduce 100%, but it might minimizes, because to reduce bias, you have to use RCT, randomized controlled trial. But here we reduce as much as possible by using at least, the best, more rigorous econometric model. Thank you for the question. It's very interesting.
Thank you very much, Girma, for your response. I would now like to invite Malawi Country Manager, Eyerusalem, to give us that statement following these discussions and presentations we had. Welcome, Eyerusalem, and over to you.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, everybody. This has been a wonderful session. Actually, it was programmed for 2 hours, but we are slightly going over 2 hours. It shows the interest from everybody. And actually, I was thinking that, Girma, you have given us, an opportunity to refresh our impact evaluation 101 course. So it has been really, wonderful to, to look at what the methodologies and what went, behind these findings. And the same thing with Linda and Shuma. It was an opportunity to share with us, but also on the issues that have been raised, the issue of ownership. The issue of ownership, at least, as we cover Malawi, it's not only, the issue at community levels or at the district government levels, but it's also at a national level where we are constantly with other development partners engaging government as part of our portfolio discussion, as part of our, portfolio dialogue and other sectoral discussion to ensure, the government to take a lead on these, on these very expensive, irrigation facilities or other facilities or infrastructures. You can provide the infrastructure, but the owners have to ensure that, that it is sustainable, it is fully utilized. So sustainability is also again, another area that we're, on continuous basis that we're dialoguing with them. It's not only, as I said, for agriculture sector, but, also for other sector, whether if it is a road project, the maintenance cost has to be budgeted, adequately. So, the roads are maintained or used for a long, period, without being put, on the side. The same thing, other facilities, good example was, given on storage, we do that. But also the issue is not only the issue of sustainability or ownership, but from our side also we have a room to improve in terms of consulting stakeholders during design stage. Some of the issues could have been picked up, by the users, whether at the ground level or at community levels or organization or farmer groups level or even at the district government level. So the issue of consultation, we do have that, but maybe we really need to move further than what we are already doing. Access to markets, I cannot say more about it. It doesn't matter how many tons of vegetables, especially vegetables that are perishable. If we cannot deliver them to the market on timely manner, I mean, this is also something that I wonder in Malawi. I mean, you see during tomato season, tons of tomatoes are all over the place at a very cheap price, but because of the lack of markets, they cannot even be used, or value added in the country, or they cannot even be exported. So this is again, actually during our CSP midterm review, the government has also raised, how the bank can support, in the remaining period of the CSP. So our discussion with Chuma will continue as we design, as we put together the projects in agriculture sector to also pick up some of the special agro processing, in terms of preparing the country, in putting up those very nice special economic zone. I've seen, some of the special economic zones that have been put, in Ethiopia, amazing. So we really would want to see, those kind of, facilities with our support, with other development partner support in number of, our member countries, of course, including Malawi as well. We've also talked about, of course, gender, the issue of, children health and nutrition, land issue. By the way, we've done, a land policy brief recently, following the land study that was conducted by the Africa Natural Resource Center. Maria, thank you. We've been working with Maria on the land policy issue, which is giving us an opportunity again, to raise this with governments and other stakeholders. Land is actually, as we are talking today, even the parliament a few weeks ago, which was completed actually, which the parliament session ended last week, the issue of land was, a very prominent issue, in Malawi currently. So even the policy brief that we have done will become very instrumental as the government is trying to identify areas where they can amend some of the policies, both for rural land as well as urban land. We've done a gender profile study, which is about to be, cleared by the gender sector departments. These are actually studies we really believe in knowledge products. In undertaking this, by the way, this did not come from other places, but we made utilized some of our administrative budget to really undertake these studies. The same thing on the child health nutrition study, which Vinda will be leading. We're also working with the human development department, particularly the health sector, coming together with them, and we will also be using from our own administrative budget. We will be starting the recruitment process for this for this study. Hopefully, it will be concluded by the end of next year. Maybe one thing that I should also share with you, last year around March, Malawi, Mozambique, Zimbabwe experienced, the climate issue. The cyclone happened, and some of the infrastructure that was even financed by us were affected. So, also the lessons that we are taking, though it didn't come here, is how do we build better? Some of the, facilities, irrigation facilities, were not built to be weather resistant. Time is changing, so this is also something that that we are taking note of. There are so many lessons that are embedded. This is not only the lessons that are coming here are not only for this project, but for also other projects as we go forward. But maybe I don't think this has come in Vinda's presentation or from Girma's presentation, but I just wanted to share with you that the agriculture infrastructure support project that was evaluated. It was a very unique project because it was the first project to use renewable energy for irrigation at a large scale in Malawi. So this was also a good story or a positive impact that we can talk about, which has created employment and so on. So just let me stop here, and but it has been really wonderful. We appreciate IDEV, Karen, for your support, for putting this your excellent team together, and Oladapo is not here, but has been wonderful to work with. Chuma, of course, my colleague Vinda, and you guys have been awesome, the facilitator, everybody. So I just want to say thank you so much. I think we really need to do more of this. And again, yeah, it's been excellent from my side to collaborate with the sector department, and particularly with IDEV of this. Let me stop here. Thank you, Maria. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Eyerusalem, for those warm statements, and also the statements which clarified some of the issues. I would now like to invite Madhu, the division manager from IDEV 2, to give us the closing remarks. But before I invite, I would also like to remind participants that there was that link which would like to have your feedback. Madhu, welcome so much, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I hope you are able to hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Madhu, and as Maria said, I manage the Division 2 of IDEV. It has been a very enriching experience listening to the evaluation lessons and the perspectives from the colleagues from the operations this morning. I would like to express our deepest appreciation for the participation of colleagues, and a big thank you to the Malawi Country Office AHAI, AHFR, and IDGS in this learning event, which is ably facilitated by Maria, Mark, and Marta. As you know, it would be a big adventure trying to summarize what we have learned today, this morning in 5 minutes. However, I would like to recollect some of the key takeaways from what we learned today. We heard the key lessons from IDEV evaluation focused on irrigation projects. For the development practitioners, as we all, not all that we heard today are new knowledge, but the effort here is to use the knowledge we have learned, we have acquired to improve our work and thereby contribute to enhancing the bank's development effectiveness. We discussed some of the key factors that affect development outcomes of irrigation projects, and also the possibilities for using those lessons in the bank's future work. We learned first thing I learned about is about the approach. We usually direct a lot of our resources on technical solutions to address development problems. We build irrigation infrastructure, we build market infrastructure. All these are very important, but it is not enough. We should ensure participation and partnership of key stakeholders, including the private sector, the government, and other development partners. More importantly, we need to build capacity and governance systems of local institutions to achieve sustainable outcomes. We have seen several instances where even the technical designs were inadequate, leading to the facilities becoming dysfunctional. The water management interventions need to be based on an integrated framework, keeping in mind a value chain approach. So that is the first thing that I take away. The second is about some of the preconditions for effectiveness, for farmers to take advantage of the opportunities arising from irrigation development. Changes are required in the farming system, access to land for men and women, and the social organization, which is very important. Thirdly, or lastly, but not the least, regarding the final outcomes of poverty reduction, the Malawi impact evaluation brought out some important findings. While irrigated farming did improve food security and food diversity, it did not always improve child nutrition and health. And more importantly, empowering women to participate in irrigated farming can improve poverty reduction and household welfare more than what men can do. The evaluation, as you know, has made some recommendations, which is not normal. For impact evaluations, we only have lessons, but
excuse me, Girma.
Yes.
Your mic is not
Okay.
performing well, and it makes it difficult for interpreters to interpret.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
All right. So I was. Is it okay now? Is it? Are you able to hear now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Interpreters.
Okay.
Yes.
What I was saying was that we learned something about from this impact evaluation of irrigation. We learned something important about the final outcomes on poverty reduction. The impact evaluation brought out a major finding that irrigated farming did improve food security, and food diversity, but it did not always improve child nutrition and health. This is very important. And more importantly, we also learned that empowering women to participate in irrigated farming can improve poverty reduction and household welfare more than what men could do. The evaluation made the recommendations, and in addition to the lessons learned, evaluation made recommendations, and the management is committed to implementing those recommendations institutions. And as we heard, Malawi country office has already taken measures in order to implement some of the recommendations. From Winter, we heard about the challenges and the measures already taken. We have learned that there are issues about lack of extension services, low capacity of local institutions, lack of ownership of the irrigation schemes by the beneficiaries, and also the conflicts. And also we see that measures are taken in the lines of supporting support capacity and governance systems, develop agricultural markets, and more emphasis on knowledge work and policy dialogue. We also learned from Mr. Girma a very important, a very informative presentation on the bank's ongoing actions and plans to establish special agro-industrial processing zones, which follow an integrated value chain approach. And we also note that the government is expected to play a very enabling role with active participation of the private sector and involvement of the development partners. And this is a very right approach, and that is what the evaluation also has put forward, or that is what we also learned from the evaluation. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. Over to you, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madhu, for that closing remarks. I would now like to thank you all, and we have now reached the end of our session. We apologize for the 24 minutes which we have exceeded, but I think it's acceptable. Thank you so much, and this is the end of our session. Have a great Friday and have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you very much, Maria, Mark, Magdalena. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Thanks, Maria. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, Maria. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hi, Maria. Thank you very much
Hello.
for taking over. Mark, we have been trying to fix his internet. It has not worked, unfortunately. I'm lucky Tom and I were in. That's why we are able to work from the background. But we're also fearing, because it's like there is a general problem where we are. He really kept on the IT trying so much to reconnect him several times. He's trying to connect from different devices. But nonetheless, you've done it very well. It has gone very well. I'm so excited. And Eyerusalem was actually on point when she suggested that we have all these backups. You see, it has really but actually, we're all on the background trying to see if we can step in, just in case of anything.
Yeah, and thank you all for your support.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
This has been excellent. Thank you very much. And you all did amazing. And thank you for the IT team as well. And also our interpreters. Yeah, Girma, this has been excellent. And Lucia, you've been listening to the whole session. And yeah, let's have a wonderful weekend. And it has really been wonderful collaborating with all of you. It has been fun. You know, while we're delivering on the need.
Thank you, Eyerusalem. It has been a lot of fun for me too. And let's hope that the conversation continues. This is just the beginning. So let's hope that you will continue and do even more things. Of course, we'll be coming back with more resource information. You saw I tried to send some graphical resources yesterday. We are finalizing the design of the report, the summary report itself. We've done some